At 6 p.m., the packed subway car stops inside the tunnel, and every hand tightens around whatever it can reach. For one office worker, it is the overhead rail, cold, smudged, vibrating above his head while the screech of metal on metal cuts through the car. The dangerous moment is not only that the train has stopped. It is that the crowd begins to move as one nervous body, and his own mind wants to join it. Someone curses. Someone asks why the doors will not open. Someone breathes too fast, and suddenly the air feels smaller than it is. What do you become when there is no space to escape, no answer from the speaker, and no control over the next minute? This is where samurai discipline begins, not by removing the tunnel, not by silencing the crowd, but by teaching you how to stand correctly inside pressure. The office worker has already spent the day being measured. Measured by email. Measured by meetings. Measured by the small humiliations of fluorescent light, slow elevators, calendar alerts, and the quiet pressure to look composed when his mind has been running behind since breakfast. Now he is standing in a packed subway car at 6 p.m., shoulder pressed against a stranger's backpack, one dress shoe wedged beside the wheel of someone's suitcase, his fingers wrapped around the overhead rail because there is nowhere else for his body to go. Then the train stops. No announcement at first. Just the sudden break, the hard lean of bodies, the screech of metal on metal dragging through the tunnel like the city itself is grinding its teeth. For 3 seconds, everyone waits like civilized people. Then the mood changes. A man near the doors pulls out one earbud and says, "Are we stuck?" A woman looks up from her phone. Someone farther down the car laughs once, too loudly, the kind of laugh people use when they are trying to convince their own body that nothing is wrong. The lights stay on, but they seem thinner now. The windows show nothing but black tunnel wall. The office worker feels his hand tighten around the overhead rail. This is the first battlefield, not the tunnel, not the delay, not even the packed car. It is the moment his body decides the crowd might know more than he does. Panic spreads socially before it spreads logically. One person's breath changes. Another person's voice rises. A third person starts blaming the transit system, the conductor, the city, the whole broken machinery of modern life. Soon the facts are almost irrelevant. The train is not moving, the air feels warm, the doors are closed, and the human nervous system starts treating uncertainty like danger. The office worker tells himself to stay calm, but the command is weak because it has no structure behind it. His collar feels tighter. His jaw locks. He shifts his weight, but there is no better position. The overhead rail, once just a piece of metal, becomes the only proof that his body still has a fixed point. He can feel old fingerprints in the grime beneath his palm. He can feel the faint vibration of the stalled train, or maybe that is only his own pulse traveling through his arm. Then someone says, "I can't breathe in here." That sentence moves through the car faster than the announcement system ever could. Heads turn. A teenager near the center starts looking for space that does not exist. A man in a suit begins tapping the door with his knuckle, not hard enough to do anything, just hard enough to show the rest of the car that his fear is found in action. A woman asks if there is another exit. Nobody answers with authority, so everyone answers with anxiety. The office worker feels the claustrophobic breakdown approach like a wave behind his ribs. It does not arrive as drama. It arrives as negotiation. Maybe I should push toward the doors. Maybe I should tell people to move. Maybe I should crouch down. Maybe I should yell for someone to do something. Maybe I need out right now. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think it means having no fear. They imagine the disciplined person standing untouched while the rest of the world shakes. But inside that subway car, untouched is not real. The disciplined person still feels the heat, the noise, the trapped breath, the animal need for space. The difference is command. Fudoshin is not emotional numbness. It is the refusal to hand authority over to the loudest sensation in the body. The office worker's fear is allowed to exist. His lungs are allowed to complain. His mind is allowed to flash images of being trapped there for an hour, missing dinner, losing control in front of strangers, becoming one more panicked person in a panicked car. None of that makes him weak. But if fear gets command, his world shrinks to one brutal instruction: escape. And when escape is impossible, the mind starts attacking reality. It attacks the delay. It attacks the people standing too close. It attacks the man tapping the door. It attacks the woman asking questions. It attacks the body for needing air, the train for stopping, the city for being the city. That is the hidden collapse in social chaos. The person does not only lose calm. He starts losing humanity. Strangers become obstacles. Voices become threats. Someone else's fear becomes an insult. The crowd stops being made of tired people trying to get home and becomes one living pressure pressing against his skin. A commuter without discipline reacts by adding more disorder to the car. He pushes because he feels pushed. He raises his voice because others are loud. He demands certainty from people who do not have it. His eyes dart from face to face, searching for either a rescuer or an enemy. He mistakes motion for control. But motion is not command. In the same subway car, under the same dead halt in the tunnel, a disciplined response looks smaller. Almost unimpressive. The office worker does not give a speech. He does not become the hero of the train. He does not conquer fear with some cinematic transformation. He simply notices that his hand is crushing the overhead rail. That noticing matters. Because the first sign of returning command is not peace. It is awareness. He loosens his fingers by 1 degree. Not fully. Just enough to prove he is still choosing. He lowers his shoulders half an inch. He turns his eyes away from the sealed doors and looks at the floor between his shoes. Scuffed rubber. A crushed receipt. The silver edge of the subway threshold. Small details return the world to size. The screech of metal is gone now, replaced by the hum of the stalled car, the murmur of anxious voices, the thin buzz of lights overhead. His mind still wants to run ahead. It wants to imagine the next 10 minutes, the next 30, the worst possible version of this delay. But the overhead rail tells a simpler truth. He is standing. He has a grip. He has one breath available. The crowd is still unstable, but he does not have to become its echo. This is the confrontation beneath the commute. A man who has spent all day being controlled by external demands now faces a pressure no calendar can organize. No manager can clarify it. No phone app can solve it. No productivity system can turn the train back on. All he has is the space between stimulus and surrender. And that space is narrow. It may be no wider than the distance between his palm and the rail. No wider than one breath taken without obeying the panic beside him. No wider than the choice not to curse, not to shove, not to stare wild-eyed at the door as if terror can open steel. But narrow does not mean powerless. In P1, the lesson is simple and hard. Emotion can rise, but it does not get the command seat. In P1.C3, social chaos tests that lesson through infection. The crowd becomes a weather system. Fear moves from face to face. Irritation becomes permission. One person breaks tone, and others follow. The office worker's real test is whether he can stay human when the room stops feeling human. He hears the woman ask again, "Is anyone saying anything?" His first impulse is annoyance. It comes sharp and ugly. Why is she asking us? We don't know either. Then he sees her hand. It is shaking around her phone. That one detail cuts through the fog. She is not an obstacle. She is afraid. The man tapping the door is not an enemy. He is afraid. The teenager searching the car with wide eyes is not weakness made visible. He is afraid. And the office worker, with his white knuckles around the overhead rail, is afraid too. Discipline does not make him superior to them. It makes him responsible for not multiplying the fear. That is the quiet honor of a long commute gone wrong. No applause. No title. No clean ending yet. Just one tired office worker in a packed subway car, standing under the city at 6 p.m., learning that the first person he must lead is himself. The train has not moved. The tunnel has not opened. The crowd has not become calm. But his hand on the overhead rail has changed meaning. A minute ago, it was desperation. Now it is a post. A place to return. A reminder that even when the city stops, command can begin in the smallest visible choice. Discipline does not begin after you feel calm. It begins in the first second you realize you are about to lose command. Inside that stalled subway car, the office worker does not get a clean training floor. He does not get silence. He does not get a teacher standing in front of him, explaining the lesson with patience. He gets a tunnel, a crowd, bad air, the aftertaste of a long workday, and the metallic memory of that screech still sitting in his ears. That is why this is shugyo. Not hardship for the sake of looking hard. Not suffering as a personality. Training. The first practice is to stop the first reaction before it becomes behavior. His mind says, move. Push. Demand. Escape. He does not obey it. He lets the command appear, but he does not turn it into motion. His shoes stay where they are. His shoulders do not drive into the person in front of him. His mouth does not throw blame into the car. He gives himself one clean second, even if that second feels almost impossible. 1 second is not small when panic wants the whole body. Then he names what is happening, silently. This is fear. This is heat. This is the feeling of being trapped. This is the crowd entering my nervous system. He does not say it out loud. He does not perform calm for strangers. He names it inside his own head because unnamed fear becomes atmosphere. Named fear becomes something he can hold. The train is still stuck. The tunnel is still black beyond the windows. People are still talking over one another. But now there is a difference between the event and his obedience to the event. The second practice is to return the body to the present through the overhead rail. A minute ago, his hand was wrapped around that rail like it was the last object on earth. His grip was not discipline. It was panic with fingers. So he changes the grip. He opens his hand slightly, then closes it again with intention. Not loose enough to lose balance. Not tight enough to prove fear is in charge. He feels the cool metal across his palm. He feels the faint vibration in the rail. He notices the smear of old fingerprints, the small dents, the ordinary ugliness of a public object touched by thousands of tired people trying to get home. That rail becomes the border. Above the rail, noise, speculation, tunnel, delay. Below the rail, his hand, his breath, his next choice. Then he lowers his attention to his feet. Both soles on the floor. Weight even. Knees unlocked. He stops leaning forward like his body is trying to leave before the doors open. He lets his spine get tall without becoming stiff. In a packed subway car, posture is not decoration. It is command made visible to the body. The third practice is breath, but not the kind people talk about as if breathing were magic. He does not take some dramatic inhale that announces his self-control to the whole car. He simply closes his mouth, breathes in through his nose if he can, and lets the exhale become longer than the inhale. Not perfect. Not elegant. Just longer. One breath. Then another. The car is warm. Someone's backpack presses against his side. The speaker above them crackles but says nothing clear. A phone drops, hits the floor, and someone mutters under their breath. His body still wants more air than the moment seems to offer. So he stops trying to win the whole tunnel. He only wins the next exhale. That is the fourth practice, shrink the battle. A person in social chaos often tries to solve everything at once. How long will we be stuck? Is there enough air? What if someone panics? What if the doors stay closed? What if I lose it here, in front of everyone, with my tie still on and my work badge in my pocket? The mind builds a whole disaster out of unanswered questions. Samurai discipline cuts the battlefield down to one action. Do not force the doors. Do not shove. Do not feed the noise. Keep one hand on the rail. Make space where possible. Listen for the announcement. Look for the person closest to braking, not the person loudest in the car. The office worker turns his head slowly, not searching for danger like a hunted animal, but scanning the car as a human being. The woman with the shaking phone is still near him. The teenager has gone quiet, eyes fixed on the closed doors. The man who tapped the door has stopped tapping, but his jaw is still working. The office worker cannot rescue the train. But he can reduce the pressure in his square foot of the car. So he shifts his briefcase down between his shoes instead of letting it block someone's knees. He angles his shoulder a few inches away from the woman beside him. He says, low and steady, we're stopped, but the lights are on. Let's wait for the announcement. That sentence is not brilliant. It does not solve anything. That is why it matters. In a crowd, calm must become physical before it becomes persuasive. A quiet voice, a little space, a body that does not surge toward the doors, these are small acts, but small acts are how social chaos stops multiplying. The fifth practice is to protect the mind from borrowed panic. The office worker hears someone say, this is insane. Another person says, they always do this. Someone else says, what if we're here all night? He feels each sentence try to enter him. So he does not argue with every voice. Arguing with panic often gives panic a stage. Instead, he keeps returning to the overhead rail. Palm. Metal. Feet. Breath. Next action. Again. Palm. Metal. Feet. Breath. Next action. This repetition is not a trick. It is ritual. A way back. The sixth practice is to refuse the ego's need to look unaffected. There is a false version of discipline that tries to appear above everyone else. It rolls its eyes at fear. It judges the anxious person. It says, I'm not like these people. That is not Fudoshin. That is pride wearing a calm face. The office worker feels fear too. His chest is tight. His shirt sticks slightly at the back of his neck. His mind still wants the doors to open right now. But because he admits the fear inwardly, he does not need to act it outwardly. That humility keeps him useful. A voice finally comes through the speaker, broken but understandable enough. Mechanical issue, temporary delay, remain inside the train. The announcement does not make the car peaceful. It gives the fear a shape. Some people complain harder. Some people relax. Some people immediately start texting. The office worker feels his own frustration rise again because the message is vague, and vague information is hard to stand under. So he practices again. He does not need the perfect explanation to keep command of his own body. He does not need the city to become competent before he becomes steady. He does not need the crowd to calm down before he stops contributing to the crowd's fear. The overhead rail is still there. This time, when his hand closes around it, the meaning is different. It is no longer a desperate handle. It is a training post. A reminder that command is not a mood. It is a repeated return. Stop. Name. Grip. Breathe. Shrink. Act. Repeat. That is the ritual inside the tunnel. Not glamorous. Not dramatic. No one may notice. But the person practicing it notices. His body learns that being trapped does not have to mean being taken over. His mind learns that the crowd can be loud without becoming his commander. His fear learns that it can speak without receiving the keys. And somewhere in that stalled subway car, under the city at 6 p.m., the long commute becomes more than a delay. It becomes a dojo with fluorescent lights, crowded shoulders, warm air, and one overhead rail teaching a tired man how to remain himself when everyone around him is starting to disappear into reaction. The train still does not move. That matters. Because real discipline does not need the scene to become beautiful before it becomes useful. The subway car is still packed shoulder to shoulder. The windows still show the black wall of the tunnel. The air is still warm with too many bodies and too little patience. A few phones are held up toward the ceiling, searching for signal that will not come. Someone keeps refreshing a screen as if the city might apologize through a loading icon. But the rhythm inside the car has changed by 1 degree. Not enough for a movie ending. Enough for reality. The office worker notices it first in his own hand. His fingers are still around the overhead rail, but they are no longer crushing it. The metal is cold against his palm. His thumb rests along the underside instead of digging into it. His wrist is not locked. His shoulder has dropped. Nothing about the tunnel has opened. Something in him has. A minute ago, every sound entered his body like an order. A cough. A complaint. The speaker crackling. The scrape of someone's shoe against the floor. Every noise told him to react, to brace, to prepare for some larger collapse. Now the sounds are still there, but they arrive as information. The man near the doors complains again, but the office worker hears fatigue underneath the anger. The woman with the shaking phone asks if anyone caught the announcement, and he answers without irritation. Mechanical issue. They said stay inside the car. His voice is not loud. That is important. He does not try to dominate the car with calm. He does not perform leadership. He does not become another force pressing against people who already feel trapped. He simply gives the truth in a lower tone than the fear around him. And lower tones matter in crowded places. A few heads turn. Not because he has authority, but because he has not added heat. The woman nods once. The teenager near the center hears it too and stops staring at the doors for a second. Small movements. Small permissions. A body that sees another body remain steady begins to remember that steadiness is possible. This is the opposite of the intro. At the beginning, the packed subway car felt like one nervous body pulling him into its breakdown. The overhead rail was a desperate handle. The screech of metal on metal had cut through the car and left everyone waiting for the next bad sound. His mind had rushed toward the doors before his feet could move. Now the crowd is still uncertain, but he is no longer being dragged by every wave. The rail has become a post inside him. Not a symbol in some soft, decorative way. A real object. Steel. Cold. Public. Ordinary. The kind of thing nobody respects until the train stops. He returns to it again and again, not because it saves him, but because it reminds him where his command begins. Palm on rail. Feet on floor. Eyes open. One useful sentence. One less shove. One less sharp look. One less person feeding the room. That is transformation in social chaos. It rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with music. It does not make the body fearless. It shows up as the refusal to make a bad moment worse. The office worker still wants out. He still imagines fresh air at the next platform, the doors opening, people pouring out into the station, everyone pretending they were calmer than they were. He still feels the animal dislike of being boxed in. He still feels the pressure behind his ribs when the train gives a small mechanical lurch and then stops again. But now he has a procedure. He does not worship the procedure. He uses it. He names the fear without giving it the microphone. He anchors his hand. He breathes through the next moment instead of fighting the whole delay. He looks at the people closest to him as people, not obstacles. He chooses the next action small enough to perform well. A man tries to squeeze past him toward the doors. Before, the office worker might have stiffened. He might have taken it as an insult, another body stealing what little space he had left. But he sees the man's face, tight, embarrassed, not aggressive, just cornered by his own discomfort. The office worker shifts half a step, as much as the car allows. Careful, he says, not cold, not sweet. Just steady. The man stops pushing so hard. That is not peace. It is order returning in inches. A child farther down the car starts asking a parent how long they will be stuck. The parent gives an answer that sounds more brave than certain. The lights flicker once, and the whole car inhales together. The old wave tries to return. The office worker feels it. For a second, his fingers tighten around the rail again. This is the part people forget. Transformation is not a permanent mood. It has to be renewed under pressure. The first victory does not protect you from the second wave. The second wave asks the same question in a different voice. Are you still in command? So he renews it. He loosens the grip. He lets the exhale lengthen. He does not stare at the lights as if his stare can keep them alive. He looks down at the floor between his shoes, the scuffed rubber, the crushed receipt, the briefcase now tucked where it is not blocking anyone. The world becomes specific again. Panic hates specific things. Panic wants fog, speed, prediction, rumor, total collapse. Specific things bring the mind back to scale. The rail. The floor. The breath. The person beside him. The announcement already given. The next minute, not the next hour. Modern samurai discipline lives here. Not in armor. Not in ceremony removed from life. Not in pretending a subway delay is noble. It lives in the ordinary American pressure chamber, after work, underground, surrounded by strangers, tired enough to be selfish, trapped long enough to be tested. Honor, in this moment, is not dramatic. It is not making your fear everyone else's burden. Calm command does not mean the office worker becomes silent stone. It means he becomes trustworthy under pressure. His emotions remain present, but they are no longer steering without permission. Then, finally, the train gives a deeper sound beneath the floor. Not the screech from before. This sound is lower. Heavy. Mechanical. The kind of sound that makes everyone pause because hope can be just as contagious as fear. The lights hold. The car shifts. Someone says, "We're moving." Slowly, almost reluctantly, the subway begins to roll forward through the tunnel. The relief in the car is messy. People sigh too loudly. Someone laughs. Someone curses under their breath, but with less force now. The woman with the phone closes her eyes for half a second. The teenager leans back from the doors. The man who had been pushing stands still, embarrassed by how much he needed the train to move. The office worker keeps his hand on the overhead rail. Only now, the rail is no longer proof that he survived being trapped. It is proof that he practiced while trapped. That distinction will follow him above ground. When the train reaches the platform and the doors finally open, the crowd spills out with the impatience of people returning to their own lives. Nobody thanks him. Nobody knows what he prevented in himself. Nobody saw the private battle clearly enough to name it. But he knows. He steps onto the platform with his work bag, his tired face, his loosened hand, and a different understanding of the long commute. The city will stop again. People will panic again. Metal will scream against metal again. But he has learned the beginning of command. When the crowd becomes a storm, do not become weather. Maybe your tunnel is not underground. Maybe it is an office where everyone is angry before anyone understands the problem. Maybe it is a kitchen at the end of a long day, a hospital waiting room, a late bill, a crowded school hallway, a family argument, a commute that keeps stealing pieces of your patience. Every person has a place where the air feels smaller. The lesson is not to pretend you are untouched. The office worker was afraid. His body wanted out. His mind wanted to follow the crowd into reaction. But his hand found the overhead rail, his breath found the next second, and his conduct became 1 degree steadier. That is enough to begin. If this stayed with you, carry it into the next crowded moment. Samurai discipline is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming trustworthy under pressure. When the crowd becomes a storm, do not become weather.